Hi everybody, welcome to my channel. My name is Sarah and today I'm doing my best books of 2023 wrap up. I read like 78 or 79 books. I will be doing an entire tier ranking video of all the books I read this year, but these are my top 10 favorites. I have a few honorable mentions because it just felt weird to not give any credit to some of these books. And the first one is a bit of a, doesn't quite count for 2023 because I finished it New Year's Eve last year, but I really want to mention it because it's a book that I still think about. The reading experience was so unique and it just really stuck with me. So the first honorable mention is Tomorrow, Tomorrow, and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. This book follows two friends over the series of like 30 plus years. So they start off meeting as kids and it goes through, the roller coaster of adolescency and friendship and how friendship changes as you get older. Follows them through those years, but also they wind up developing video games together, which that part of the book was so fun to me. I love video games, so having that be a huge part of the story personally was really, really fun. I will say, if you're not a gamer, I think you would still really enjoy this book because it is largely about their relationship and it's a story about love. Like, I would not call this a love story. There's definitely some romance plot lines, but ultimately it's about different types of love, and that was really, really special. So this book is just truly, truly a remarkable story. My next honorable mention is the first Mistborn book, The Final Empire. I finally dove into Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere, and I'm so excited to continue. I really enjoyed it. I enjoy the magic system in this book, but it wasn't quite in my top 10. So The Final Empire follows our main character, Vin, who is kind of this scrappy street urchin, I believe she's referenced as. And she's joined various thieving crews to try to survive. This story very much centers around found family and the crew she eventually finds herself in, and they're a part of a major heist, which I love a good heist story. And that heist kind of turns into this major rebellion that she is then a part of, and all the while she's learning how to harness her powers. So I loved the magic system. I loved the characters, and I'm so excited to see where this goes. And then my last honorable mention was The Duke and I, which is Bridgerton number 1. So this book, it's nothing crazy. It's nothing out of this world. I loved just being in that world and being in the Regency era with these characters, and I enjoyed the love story. So I feel like I needed to mention it because I really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to continue the series. I finally got my Lumicrate special editions of Bridgerton. I was waiting to finish the series until I got my complete set, so now we can continue, and Bridgerton Season 3 comes out in May. So that's going to be a 2024 goal of mine for sure. Okay, so let's get into the actual 10 books. These are not really in any order except for my number 1 book. That one I will save for last because that one, hands down, was my favorite book. The rest all fall within the 10 spaces kind of evenly, I'd say. Alrighty, so the first book on my 10 best books of 2023 is Anatomy, a Love Story. Anatomy, a Love Story follows our main character, Hazel, who lives in in the 1800s. So she lives in a world where women don't have much say in anything. They don't really have rights. They're kind of controlled by the men in their lives. And Hazel's definitely fallen victim to that. She wants nothing more than to be a surgeon, but she's not allowed to study. The people in her life can't comprehend why a lady would want to be a surgeon, why that she would want to do something that's so, like, not ladylike, I guess. She doesn't let that deter her. She sneaks into a few surgical theaters where they literally do a surgery in front of, a group of doctors, trying to learn, trying to see, because she's so curious. When she gets kicked out of one of these demonstrations, because obviously she's not allowed. After she gets kicked out, she runs into Jack. Jack is living on the streets. He's just trying to survive, and he's also a resurrection man. So basically, resurrection men go and dig up freshly buried bodies in graveyards and sells them to the highest bidder for whatever reason. There's a number of reasons why someone would be bidding on bodies. Basically, he doesn't really ask questions. So when Hazel gets kicked out of this surgical demonstration, she runs into Jack. They kind of develop an unlikely friendship and alliance, and they realize that they can help each other out. Hazel has struck a deal with one of the physician instructors, I guess, that if she's able to pass the medical examination without taking, she could practice medicine. But she's not allowed to participate in his lectures. So she's got to figure out how to pass this test on her own. So she needs bodies. Jack can provide that. And through this, there's various romances, a love triangle of sorts, and it's just such a good story. It's kind of gothic, it's kind of eerie. It reminds me of Stalking Jack the Ripper meets like Frankenstein. It was so fun. Also, there is kind of a thread of fantasy woven into this. There's hints of immortality and how there might be some slight magic in this world mixed with medicine. Especially the way this book ends really hints that the next book is going to pick up on that a lot more. But I loved how it was hinted throughout the book. It kept me intrigued throughout because of that. So I would highly recommend this. It was fantastic. So the next book is Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. This is a trilogy. So I read the first book and then continued on to the second book. And I am currently reading the third book, and I'm planning to finish it tonight. It's New Year's Eve, so we'll see how that goes. I really want to try to squeeze this last book in before the new year. This trilogy has been so much. The world, the characters. Yeah. So Once Upon a Broken Heart follows our main character, Evangeline Fox. The book starts off with her visiting the Church of the Prince of Hearts, who is a fate. One thing about this world that everyone tells you is you never make a deal with a fate because they are tricky and they will always come out on top. It's never quite what it seems, and you'll probably wind up getting hurt in some way, emotionally, physically, mentally. But she's desperate. She has just lost her very first love. He had, promised that he'd love her forever, and now she's just found out that he is actually engaged to her stepsister. Sounds like a bit of a miscommunication there, but okay. So she's pleading at the Church of the Prince of Hearts to basically gain back her first love. And he winds up showing up and agreeing to help her, but in exchange for them making a deal. So of course she agrees to it. Evangeline makes the worst decisions, I will say that. She agrees, and things just spin out of control. And the story just takes off I don't think I really need to say much more than that because it's a wild ride and it's so fun. I love Evangeline. I love Jax, who is the Prince of Hearts. He goes by Jax. The next book is another fantasy series that I feel like is very accessible to people who maybe don't want to dive into like an epic fantasy or something that's like takes half the book to understand what the heck is going on. That is none other than Throne of Glass. I read this entire series this year and absolutely loved it. I enjoyed this even more than A Court of Thorns and Roses, and I did really enjoy those books. So the fact that this just completely blew that out of the water for me, I think says a lot. So Throne of Glass follows our main character, Selena, who has been orphaned and was raised basically by like the king of assassins. She's kind of grown up in this underground sort of society, basically learning how to fight, learning how to steal, and learning how to kill. So flash forward to when the book starts, Selena finds herself as a slave in a prison camp. She's been captured and she's been sent there to die. People who go to this encampment don't make it out. So the story starts with her kind of having no hope when one day one of the king's captains shows up and is like, if you want a chance for freedom, we'd like you to compete to be the king's champion. She has a reputation that follows her as being the best. They want her to compete. Of course she agrees, and that's really where this story starts off. It's her competing in this competition with a bunch of other fighters and thieves and outlaws, basically, all of them vying for this one elite position. To make matters more complicated, as the competition starts, something or someone is brutally killing off the candidates. So not only is she trying to earn her freedom, she's just trying to survive because the candidates are showing up dead and no one really knows what's going on. So there was like this unexpected murder mystery element to this book, and I just ate it up. I was not expecting that. Granted, I'm pretty sure it does say that on the back of the book. Yeah, it definitely does. But I went into this not reading the back of the book. Everyone talks about Throne of Glass. I didn't think I needed to read the back. So it was a surprise to me, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the entire series. This series had some of my most favorite characters and some of the best villains. One thing I feel like Sarah J. Maas does really well is developing characters in a way where you either start off loving them and then you wind up hating them, or vice versa, where you start off hating them and then by the end of the books, they're one of your favorite characters. Man in Blackbeak, if you know, you know. I would definitely recommend Throne of Glass. I loved this series. Up next, I have a middle grade book. I don't read a ton of middle grade. However, I'm a firm believer that a good story is a good story, and Harry Potter is considered middle grade. So if anybody's going to come at me in the comments for reading books my own age, I have gotten comments like that. I don't want to hear it. So with that said, I read The Screaming Staircase by Jonathan Stroud. This book was so fun. It follows a group of teenagers who basically run a paranormal investigation company. They live in a world where ghosts kind of run rampant. In order to get rid of ghosts, you have to find the source and get rid of and like neutralize it, basically. So that's what these various investigation companies kind of do, and they're all run by like teenagers. So this follows one of their investigations where they come across a body of a woman who was a part of a cold case, and finding her body brings the mystery back up, so they decide to try to solve this cold case, which angers some people, and chaos ensues, and there's lots of ghostly activity, lots of twists and turns. I loved it. This book was so fun. It reminded me so much of the show Supernatural, which is one of my absolute favorite shows. It was literally like Supernatural meets Scooby-Doo. And if you've seen that crossover episode, you know that is the best. This was just a fun book, and I would highly recommend for anyone who's just interested in a solid ghost story. Next, I finished the Darker Shades of Magic trilogy. So my favorite book out of the trilogy was A Gathering of Shadows. And this is by V. Schwab, my all-time favorite author. Love her. So basically, A Darker Shade of Magic follows our main characters, Kel and Lila, who live in a world where there's like parallel universe Londons. Each London has varying degree of magic. So Black London has magic that basically was so unruly and unkept that it just destroyed its world. Then there's White London, where the magic is very chaotic and brutal and kind of dark. So it's kind of like the Wild West there. There's like no rules, anything goes. Very dangerous. Then there's Red London, which is where Kel lives. And that London has magic, but it's much more contained. It's much more controlled. And then there's Grey London, which is very much like the London we would know. I like to think of it as Muggle London. Basically, there is no magic. There's like flickers here and there, but magic just has kind of left that London. So Kel is an Antari, which allows him to travel between these parallel Londons through doorways that he can create. And as he's traveling between these Londons, he comes into contact with a very dangerous and mysterious artifact that kind of starts to cause chaos among the different Londons, and a big can of worms is opened. And he also runs into Lila Bard, who is one of my all-time favorite characters, and together they kind of fix what was undone. So then Gathering Shadows follows the aftermath of A Darker Shade of Magic. And one thing I loved about this book is it deals with a magical competition, and I'm a sucker for a magical competition. If a book promises me trials and a competition and magic, and I'm here for it. So, loved this book. I love these characters, and I would highly recommend this trilogy. The next book is Starling House by Alex E. Haro. This book was so fun. It is a gothic, eerie tale of this creepy kind of mysterious house and the guy that lives in this house. So it takes place in a southern town where there is the elusive Starling House, a very creepy and dilapidated and mysterious manor. In this town, people don't really know much about it, but there's a lot of stories and rumors and legends around it. And our main character, Opal, has grown up hearing all these stories, hearing about Starling House her entire life. And like most people, she's pretty curious. Opal's had a pretty tough life. She's been on her own with her younger brother most of her life, and she's really just struggling to get by. So when a job opportunity comes up at the mysterious Starling House, she jumps at it. Even though there are a lot of red flags and a lot of reasons to avoid the house altogether, she's curious enough and desperate enough that she takes it. Through this job, she kind of unravels the mystery of Starling House and the mystery of its current caretaker, Arthur Starling. He's just as mysterious, just as elusive, and it is just such a fun, twisty, dark, gothic tale. It is beautifully written. The atmosphere that the author created was just so, I don't even know how to describe it. It was just so perfect for what this book was, and I loved it. It just has that like cloudy day vibe, if that makes sense. It's just an eerie, gothic, weird little book, and I loved it. Speaking of gothic, weird, eerie little books, another favorite book this year was What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. This is a reimagining of The Fall of the House of Usher, and I loved this book so much. T. Kingfisher somehow makes horror sound beautiful. Like, the descriptions in this book were creepy, were sometimes gross, were very gothic and just like straight up horror, and it was still so beautifully written. It was just such a good time. If you like Edgar Allan Poe, I would highly recommend reading this. Up next, we have my introduction into cozy fantasy, which is a genre I now love, and that is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. This book was so cozy, so perfect, and it was exactly what I needed when I read it. So basically, it follows Viv, who is an orc who has kind of given up her life of questing and battling and all of that to start a coffee shop. This is a fantasy world where they don't really know what coffee is. So she not only has to open her shop, she has to also introduce it to the town. People are like, why would I want to drink hot bean water? They don't really get it. You know, if it's not mead or ale, they don't want it. And the cast of characters, the people she comes across in her journey in opening this shop and keeping it running, it was just some of the most wholesome, and just, it was such a lovely reading experience. I would highly recommend if you're a fan of fantasy and you want something that's light and just feels like being wrapped up in a warm blanket. I loved it. That brings us to our final book, my favorite book of the year, and that is Divine Rivals. I loved this book so much. The writing is absolutely stunning. The story was, in my opinion, paced perfectly. It flowed, and the characters were so well-rounded, and I felt for them, and I loved this book. I had not had that giddy feeling after finishing a book in so long, and I finally had it after finishing this. So Divine Rivals follows our main characters, Iris and Roman. They live in the city of Oath, where two gods are currently at war. So people are enlisting on either side, and Iris and Roman are both journalists at a newspaper covering the war. Just so happens they're rivals. They are both after the same columnist. They are both after the same columnist position, and just get on each other's nerves. The way they just kind of poke each other's buttons cracked me up. I loved it. I loved the banter, all of it. So that's the setting for the story. So Iris's brother has enlisted in the war for the goddess Enva, and he went off to war, hasn't been heard from in months. So Iris is getting really worried, and in an act of kind of like desperation, she starts writing him letters and sticking them in a wardrobe, not really knowing what would happen, but they live in a magical world where buildings and objects are enchanted, so it's not unrealistic that the letter would get to him. She's desperate. She's literally grasping at straws, and the letter does disappear. However, it doesn't go to Forrest. It somehow goes to Roman, her rival. She doesn't know that these letters are going to him, and he eventually pieces together that it is Iris, but still corresponds with her, not telling her it's him. And through these letters, they really get to know each other, and that's where their love story kind of starts off. It's not a spoiler. It's on the back of the book. It's an enemies to lovers story. It is fantastic. The way things come together is just so perfect. The way that war is depicted with these like magical elements was so interesting to me, because it takes place in like the late 1800s, early 1900s, I believe. So it's a city that I can picture with technology I can picture, but like fantasy elements intermingled with war was just so different, and I absolutely loved it. So I don't know if that synopsis did this book justice. If you're not sold yet, pick it up anyway. It is so good. This was my absolute favorite book of the year, and a new all-time favorite book. It's somewhere on my all-time favorite list. So then, along with this, I did just finish Ruthless Vows last night. It was a fantastic ending to this duology. I love that it's a duology, so it's done. We don't have to wait years for the story to finish. It was great. Would highly, highly recommend these two. That wraps up my favorite books of 2023. It has been an incredible reading year, and I have big plans for 2024. So many good books on the docket. I'm planning on DNFing more books that I'm not into. We do not have time to sit through 300 plus pages of something we're not enjoying. I just wanted to thank you guys for coming along on this journey with me. I started my booktube about 5 months ago, I think. It's been one of the best things I've done all year, and I'm so thankful to my husband for encouraging me to do this. I've been talking about it for so long, and he has been my biggest supporter, and if it weren't for him, I would not have had the confidence to sit down in front of a camera and finally do it, and it has been so fun. Like, I look forward to making these weird little videos rambling about books, and I just wanted to say thank you for joining me, and hopefully you'll continue on with me in 2024. Other than that, I hope everyone has a safe and happy New Year's Eve, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. Oh, just kidding. I'll see you next year. Okay, bye.